We do love a good kingdom around here, so why not have another kingdom video? Welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be looking at the Welsh kingdom of Gwynedd. Like always, I will try and pronounce words and names as they should be spoken, but languages aren't my strong point, especially a language as difficult as Cymraeg in my very non-Welsh accent. I'm also going to be splitting this topic into a part 1, part 2 and possibly a part 3. Because there is a lot of info packed into this kingdom. They lasted a very long time compared to other early kingdoms in the Isles. The name Gwynedd is believed to be borrowed from early Irish, proof that Irish settlement in the area happened since antiquity. With Ireland being just across the pond from Wales, it's not that surprising. There is a document from the 5th century called the Atelier inscription, now housed in the Penmachno church, which we think to be the earliest record of the name. It is in memory of a man called Canturic, and the Latin inscription translates to Canturic lies here. He was a citizen of Gwynedd and a cousin of Maglos the magistrate. The use of terms such as citizen and magistrate can be used as evidence that the Romano-British culture and institutions continued in Gwynedd long after the legions had withdrawn. The title Brynyn y Brythoniaid, or the King of the Britons, was used to refer to the most powerful ruler among the Celtic Britons, both before and after the period of Roman Britain, up until the Norman invasion of Wales and the Norman conquest of England. Britons were the Brittonic-speaking people what is now Wales, England and southern Scotland. The Britons are the ethnic ancestors of the Welsh in addition to the Cornish and Bretons. Welsh traditions credited the founding of Gwynedd to the Gododdin, or the earlier Brittonic form of this being the Votadini, and the Lothians invading the lands of the Brittonic tribes of the Deca Angli, or the Vichy, and the Gingani in the 5th century. The sons of their leader, Gwynedd, were said to have possessed the land between the rivers Dee and Telfi. The true borders of the realm varied over time though. Like many places, what we consider to be in one country or place today may not have been the case in the past, but Gwynedd proper was generally thought to comprise of the cantress of Aberfoyle, Cemys and Ralsa on Anglesey, and Ashacwerth, Arfon, Dynoding, Dyffryn-Clwyd, Flin, Cos, Brufoniog and Tigernau at the mountainous mainland region of Snowdonia opposite. The region became known as Venedotia in Latin. The name was initially because of a specific Irish colony on Anglesey, but broadened to refer to Irish settlers as a whole in North Wales by the 5th century. According to 9th century monk and chronicler Nennius, North Wales was left defenceless by the Roman withdrawal and increasing raids happening by invaders from the Isle of Man and Ireland, a situation which led Gwynedd, his sons and their entourage to migrate in the mid-5th century from Gododdin, now Clackmannanshire, to settle and defend North Wales against the raiders and bring the region within Romano-British control. Whether they were actually invited to keep out the invaders or were actually raiders themselves, we don't know. It's unknown at this point. According to historical and traditional pedigrees and genealogies, Gwynedd's grandfather was Pedan Baswyr, the paternus of the Red Cloak, an epithet which suggests that he wore the cloak of a Roman officer, and maybe this is evidence of a high-ranking officer. Nennius recounts how Gwynedd brought order to North Wales, and after his death, Gwynedd was divided among his sons. Denod was awarded Dynoding, another son, Feredig, received Feredigion, Florig by Flogion in Lynn, Dogfowl by Gweling in Dyffryn-Clwyd, and Dern in Dernion. Esphalion of Esphale has not yet been located. Tibion, the eldest son, is said to have died in Gododdin, but his son, Merion, comes into the picture as Lord of Merionnev. Eonev completes this brood. Carvashon Lauhir Apignon, one of his grandsons, was the final leader to defeat the Irish on Anglesey. This overly neat origin myth has been met with skepticism. As usual, a lot of the stories in history was written long after the fact these people may or may not have actually been around. They are considered legendary historical figures. Every region has them, and everyone wants to be descended from them to prove their claims. The inhabitants of Gwynedd remained conscious of their Romano-British heritage though, and an affinity with Rome survived long after the empire retreated from Britain, particularly with the use of Latin in writing and sustaining the Christian religion. The ruling classes continued to emphasize Roman ancestors within their pedigrees as a way to link their rule with the old imperial Roman order, suggesting stability and continuity with the old order. According to the late writer, broadcaster and historian Professor John Davies, who wrote on the kingdom subject, there is a determinedly Brythonic and Roman heir to early Gwynedd, and that this is quite agreed on widely in the historic community. It's so widespread that there was the Roman heritage influence that the Professor Brian Ward Perkins of Trinity College in Oxford wrote, "It took until 1282 when Edward I conquered Gwynedd for the last part of Roman Britain to fall, and a strong case can be made for Gwynedd as the very last part of the entire Roman Empire, east and west, to fall to them." But even with this strong cultural identity and heritage, they actually quickly abandoned Roman political, social and ecclesiastical practices and institutions within Gwynedd and elsewhere in Wales. Roman knowledge was lost as the Romano-Britons shifted towards a streamlined, militaristic, near-tribal society that no longer included the use of coinage and other complex industries dependent on a money economy. Architectural techniques using brick and mortar and even more basic knowledge such as the use of the wheel in pottery production was also lost. All this points to the fact that the Welsh had to abandon those Roman ways that were insufficient or unnecessary to meet the challenge of survival that they now faced. Militarized tribal societies, even though they were politically fragmented and destructive to both sides in conflict, they seem to have offered better protection against Germanic invasion than exclusive dependence on a professional Roman army. At that time, in the troubled years of the 5th century, Roman armies were always quite keen to melt away or start a mutiny against you. Reverting to a militaristic tribal society allowed the Welsh of Gwynedd to concentrate on those martial skills necessary for their very survival, and the Romano-Britons of Western Britain did offer stiffer and an ultimately successful resistance. In the post-Roman period, the earliest petty kings, princelings or chieftains adopted the title Rí in Welsh, akin to the Irish Gaelic Rí, later replaced by Brenin, a title used to denote a less archaic form of kingship. It's assumed based on other cultures that the stronger kings annexed the territories of their weaker neighbours, and that the lineages of the victors of the early lineages should have survived. Smaller and weaker chieftains coalesced around more powerful princelings, sometimes through voluntary vassalage or inheritance, though at other times through conquest, and the lesser princelings coalesced around still greater princelings, until a regional prince could claim authority over the whole of North Wales, from the River Dyfi in the south to the Dee in the east, and incorporating Anglesey. Gwyned's heir, Yarni of Achcineva, defeated the remaining Gaelic Irish on Anglesey by 470, while his son, Carvash Yon Lau Hiarpinyon, appears to have consolidated the realm during the time of relative peace, following the Battle of Badon, where the Anglo-Saxons were defeated. During that peace, he established a mighty kingdom. After Carvashon, Gwynedd appears to have held a preeminent position among the petty Cambrian states in the post-Roman period. The great-grandson of Gwynedd, Maelgwynhir, or Maelgwyn the Tall, was regarded as an able military leader, impetuous and generous. There are several legends about this guy's life concerning either his own trickery or craftiness, or on the other hand, miracles performed against him by Christian saints. He is attributed in some old stories as hosting the first Sephod, and he is also one of the 5 Celtic British kings castigated for their sins by the contemporary Christian writers Gildas, who refer to him as Maglacanus, meaning Prince Hound in Brittonic. Written in the De Excidio et Conquesto Britanniae, Maelgwyn was curiously described as the dragon of the island by Gildas, which was possibly a title, but explicitly as the most powerful of the 5 named British kings. He wrote, "You, the last I write of, but the first and greatest in evil, more than many in nobility, but also in malice, more generous in giving, but also more liberal in sin, strong in war, but stronger to destroy your soul. Maelgwn eventually died from the plague in 547, leaving a succession crisis in his wake. His son-in-law, Leda Mwynfawr of the Kingdom of Strathclyde, claimed the throne and invaded Gwynedd to displace Maelgwn's son, Rhinhiam Rap Maelgwn. Leda was killed in the attempt, but his death was then avenged by his relatives, who ravaged the coast of Arthon. Rhin counter-attacked and exacted the same penalty on the lands of his foes in what is now south and central Scotland. The long distances these armies travelled suggest they were moving across the Irish Sea, but because almost all of what is now northern England was at this point under Brittonic rule, it is possible that his army marched to Strathclyde overland. Rhin returned to Gwynedd, and the rest of his reign was for a majority uneventful, until the relatives of Leda renewed their aggressions against Rhin, who was killed in the conflict. He was succeeded by his son, or in some accounts nephew, Beli, in 586. On the ascension of Beli's son, Lagart Beli, around 599, the situation in Britain had deteriorated significantly. Most of northern England had been overrun by the invading Angles-Adera and Bernicia, who were in the process of forming the Kingdom of Northumbria. In a rare show of common interest, it appears that Gwynedd and the neighbouring kingdom of Poys acted together to rebuff the Anglian advance, but were defeated at the Battle of Chester in 613. Following this absolute catastrophe, the approximate borders of northern Wales were set with the city of Caerleon, now called Chester, and the surrounding Cheshire Plain falling under the control of the Anglo-Saxons. Beli's grandson was Fadfan ap Iago from the line of Maelgwn. His tombstone in Gwynedd, wrote in Latin, translates to, "We thought that Catamanus was the wisest king," or Catamanus rex sapientissimus opinatissimus. He was an ancestor of the future kings of Gwynedd. And that brings us to the end of part 1 of the Kingdom of Gwynedd. We are probably only a third of the way through so far, but get yourself ready for part 2 up next on the channel. Please don't forget to share, like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below. I'll see you next time. Bye!